Tonight on NewsCenter, let's keep the nation's fiscal health sound to thoroughly carry out the reform and restructuring drives in the works. That's according to President Park Geun-hye. Nuke for nukes. Speaking on the global stage, North Korea's foreign minister says the U.S. is to be blamed for the North's controversial nuclear program. And international aid arrives in Japan, among them South Korea. Seoul sends $100,000 of aid following the devastating earthquakes that struck southern Japan, killing dozens and leaving hundreds of thousands in shelters. NewsCenter begins right now. It's 9 in Washington, 2 in London, and 10 on a Friday night here in Seoul. Hello and welcome to our viewers all across the globe. You're watching Arirang News Center. Ways to improve the nation's fiscal health. The Korean government has vowed stronger budget reforms that'll strengthen control over the allocation and execution of taxpayers' money. Our Song Ji-sun has more on the nation's financial strategy discussed at the top office today.
Improving the nation's financial health to prep for a future with slowing growth. The focus of this year's financial strategy meeting was on long-term analysis to counter future risks ahead of time. Chairing the annual meeting held to discuss next year's budget, President Park Geun-hye stressed that the government's finances must be the strong backbone of economic recovery, with uncertainties at home and abroad expected to increase in the years to come. With Korea's rapidly aging society, coupled with a rise in welfare demand and a fall in potential growth, the nation's debt-to-GDP ratio is expected to top 40% this year for the first time.
국가 재정은 4대 구조 개혁과 경제 혁신 3개년 계획을 차질 없이 뒷받침해서 성과를 구체화하고 그 열매를 국민들에게 돌려드려야 합니다.
The government has vowed all-out reform efforts to effectively manage Korea's finances. SMART, which stand for strategy, merge, autonomy, restructuring, and technology, for a more strategic distribution of resources. Korea will reinforce its fiscal regulations for stricter budget controls and present a related bill to the National Assembly for approval in the latter half of this year. Seoul would then reinvest the funds to spur new growth engines in an effort to stabilize public livelihood. The central government will also press local governments to be more responsible for their budget operations and also give the nation's 17 innovation centers a greater role so they can create more jobs through employment zones launched in each branch. Song Ji-sun, Arirang News.
Corporate restructuring has also emerged as the hot topic in the nation's parliament. And with the clock ticking on the current parliament, Korea's rival political parties are voicing the need for economic revitalization. Our Shin Se-min has the updates.
As the clock winds down on the 19th parliament, Korea's rival political parties are making a final push on efforts to stop economy-related bills from being terminated. The ruling Saenuri Party stressed the need to swiftly pass labor reform bills as a prerequisite to thorough corporate restructuring.
4 labor reform bills and bills aimed at deregulating the service sector are some of the core economy-related bills that need to be passed swiftly.
The interim chief of the main opposition Minju Party of Korea, however, claims the government should take the initiative and devise a blueprint on how to set up and execute restructuring of the country's economy.
As the opposition political party, it's a difficult task for us to execute corporate restructuring. We urge the government to closely monitor the country's economic circumstances.
Kim Jong-un, the party's interim leader, added that it will form a special economy-related committee to come up with its own plan to tackle the country's economic issues. The Splinter People's Party, too, said it is crucial that the restructuring take place quickly to minimize any possible ripple effects on the market.
The government has wasted too much time and failed to offer a firm solution. Because of this, structural reforms are more necessary than ever.
Moreover, the People's Party expressed the need to tackle the issue from a macroeconomic perspective and said those involved in corporate restructuring should be fully compensated with unemployment pay. Although the opposition drive for corporate restructuring is seen as somewhat of an uncharacteristic stance, as it would entail a mass layoffs of the labor force, there seems to be an underlying consensus among political parties on the need for a shift in the country's economic policies. Shin Se-min, Arirang News.
Now, for those planned changes for economic policy, the details of the country's long-term fiscal reform discussed at the top office today, we turn to our Park Ji-won.
The government has selected 10 main areas that particularly need a strategic and systematic overhaul regarding the execution and planning of its fiscal budget in the long term. According to the nation's finance ministry, securing financial soundness of a provincial education budget and evening out local government's fiscal self-reliance ratio top the list of areas that need to be revamped. Financial support for state-funded job creation projects and government funding to boost exports will also be overhauled in a more effective way to see more tangible results. Currently, $14 billion worth of job creation projects are underway, but according to estimates, they haven't yielded substantial growth as the youth unemployment rate grew from 7.6% in 2011 to more than 11% this March. Support for the nation's agricultural sectors will also be changed in a more systematic way to attract more private investment. The operation of the nation's innovation centers and policies and projects to boost the nation's creative sectors will also be effectively and systematically rearranged. The contents industry in particular has seen its growth rate fall. It dropped from over 13% in 2011 to 4.9% last year, so the government hopes to strengthen the nation's support for global cultural projects and cultural infrastructure. The government also selected policies regarding low birth rate and housing assistance as areas where more effective budget execution is needed. The government also plans to carry out overall reform on state-funded institutions. These policy directions made during the presidential strategy meeting will be reflected in next year's government budget allocation later this year. Park Ji-won, Arirang News.
Well, as the Korean government and the nation's political parties prepare to shake up the corporate sector, more gloomy data continue to fuel that drive. The country's top central banker has vowed to lay out measures to stem any possible financial instabilities that could erupt from sweeping restructuring efforts. Here's our Hwang Ji-hye with details.
The eye-watering losses Korea's shipbuilding industry saw last year have resulted in 15,000 people leaving their jobs. According to industry sources, the labor force of local shipbuilding companies shrunk by around 10,000, while the number of workers employed by subcontractors of those firms slid by 5,000. Shipbuilding is one of the 5 industries the government has identified as problem sectors in dire need of restructuring. The other 4 are shipping, construction, steel, and petrochemicals. With the global economy still in the doldrums and crude oil prices hanging low, the outlook for these industries this year remains glum. With that, Korea's corporate restructuring drive has been gaining momentum, with the government as well as the ruling and opposition parties gearing up to form a consultative body to discuss the issue. Korea's finance minister Yoo Il-ho welcomed the move on Friday, saying that he will actively cooperate with the body to accept new ideas. Meeting with the leaders of Korea's commercial banks the same day, the country's top central banker Lee Ju-yeol also said the Bank of Korea will lay out measures to counteract potential financial instabilities that could be prompted by the corporate shakeup. While expressing concerns over a possible decline in the banking sector's profitability, he added the government's push for corporate reforms may further aggravate existing problems. The BOK chief did say, though, that local banks will be able to overcome such difficulties as they currently have enough capacity built in to absorb the losses. Hwang Ji-hye, Arirang News.
Back-to-back nuclear talks. Chief nuclear envoys of South Korea and China met for talks in Beijing today on the heels of yesterday's U.S.-China meeting on North Korea's nuclear ambitions. Arirang's foreign affairs correspondent Kwon So-ah reports, with North Korea hiking up its bellicose rhetoric, anticipation is building up for a three-way talks on the matter.
South Korea's top nuclear chief Kim Hong-gyun and his Chinese counterpart Woo Da-wei met for talks on North Korea in Beijing Friday, with a big focus on the implementation of sanctions on the regime. Kim was said to have stressed the importance of close communication with Beijing at this time, amid North Korea's violation of UN Security Council resolutions, citing its attempted test firing of a mid-range ballistic missile last week. The meeting comes just a day after Woo's one-on-one with Washington's representative to the six-party talks, Sung Kim, in which they expressed strong opposition to Pyongyang's irresponsible acts and concern regarding a possible fifth nuclear test.
Unfortunately, North Korea has shown no interest in working with us towards some credible and meaningful effort towards denuclearization.
Seoul's foreign ministry sees significance in the back-to-back bilateral talks, hoping that they pave the way for a three-way meeting soon, which, according to an official, China is said to be open to. But some experts doubt talks would bear much fruit.
I do believe three-way talks are needed, but there are differences between South Korea and the U.S. on how to respond to Pyongyang, as well as China's perspective. While Seoul remains focused on changing North Korea through sanctions, China wants North Korea included in six-party talks.
Given the severity of the North Korean situation, Seoul's Foreign Minister Yoon Byung-se is expected to address the issue at the Conference on Interaction and Confidence-Building Measures in Asia next week in Beijing. It's the first time Seoul sends its top diplomat to the forum, which promotes peace, security, and stability in Asia. There, Yoon is likely to hold bilateral talks with his Chinese and Russian counterparts Wang Yi and Sergei Lavrov. Kwon So-ah, Arirang News.
An eye for an eye, nukes for nukes. Well, North Korea's foreign minister claims the regime has developed nuclear weapons only to cope with nuclear threats from the United States. The remarks came during a keynote speech at the UN headquarters in New York. Now, what's worrisome, as our Kim Hyun-bin reports, is that it comes at a time of growing concern that Pyongyang might go ahead with its fifth nuclear test soon.
North Korea says its country had no choice but arm itself with nuclear weapons to counter nuclear threats from the U.S. The remarks came from North Korea's foreign minister Lee Soo-young during a keynote speech at a high-level meeting of the 2030 Sustainable Development Goals at UN headquarters on Thursday. He pointed out that Washington is conducting a nuclear war game on the peninsula, referring to the annual joint Korea-U.S. military drills. Lee said that in order to remove nuclear threats, we tried dialogue and made efforts through international law. But everything went down the drain. The only thing left was to respond to nukes with nukes. Lee added that the sanctions on the regime are a challenge to sustainable development, but emphasized that it won't give in to such measures. And the U.S. trying to topple Pyongyang through an economic blockade are an expression of ignorance.
It shows that North Korea is putting an emphasis on the need to have nuclear weapons. They are justifying themselves to show the U.S. and the international community that they will not be hindered by their pressure, and is trying to go their own way.
Speculation has arisen that Lee might schedule to hold talks with U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry, with growing concerns that Pyongyang could conduct its fifth nuclear test. But the U.S. State Department says Kerry has no plans to meet Lee. However, the White House says that Washington is keen on holding talks with the North, as long as it demonstrates its denuclearization commitment. Kim Hyun-bin, Arirang News.
Well, time again, with some 90 Japanese lawmakers going ahead with a visit to a controversial shrine that honors Japan's war dead, including Class A war criminals. And Seoul continued to urge Tokyo today to squarely face history and show sincerity through action. Our Connie Kim reports.
Japan continues to face criticism as its cabinet minister and a group of lawmakers visited the controversial Yasukuni war shrine, a symbol of Japan's militarism. The shrine has been a source of diplomatic conflict, especially with Korea and China, as it honors millions of Japan's war dead, including Class A criminals. Cabinet Minister Sanae Takaichi defended herself, stating that visiting the shrine can never be a diplomatic issue, and said she prayed for the peace of the souls of those who died for Japan, as well as for the health of bereaved families. A visit by some 90 Japanese lawmakers from the ruling and opposition parties comes on the second day of the shrine's Spring Festival that runs until Saturday. Japanese lawmakers usually pay tribute to its war dead at the Yasukuni Shrine during the spring-autumn festivals and on August 15th, the anniversary of Japan's surrender in World War II. Korea said it deplores that some Japanese cabinet members and lawmakers went ahead to visit the Yasukuni Shrine, which beautifies Japan's colonial past and atrocities. Seoul's Foreign Ministry's statement issued by the spokesman said a responsible politician of Japan should squarely face history and show a humble reflection and sincere remorse through actual actions. The lawmakers' visit to the highly controversial shrine comes as Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe made a ritual offering to the shrine on the first day of the annual Spring Festival on Thursday. Abe last visited the Yasukuni Shrine in 2013 and has been sending ritual offerings to the shrine festival since then, aggravating tensions with Seoul and Beijing. Connie Kim, Arirang News.
Now, meanwhile, the southern part of that country is still reeling from the aftermath of last week's twin earthquakes. With hundreds of thousands living in shelters without water and power, international aid has begun reaching those in need. And that includes the Korean government's military transport planes carrying $100,000 worth of aid. Lee Min-young has this report.
The power supply has been recovered in our area, but water supply has not. There is no water supply even in this building. What's more, many people cannot make sure it's safe to go back home yet.
Amid rescue operations underway, many outside Japan are holding out a helping hand by airlifting water, food, and other emergency supplies to remote areas. Korea is also taking part in those efforts.
The Korean government is planning to support rescue operations in Japan, which is going through huge human and material losses due to the two powerful earthquakes that struck Kyushu, by sending $100,000 worth of relief supplies.
2 military transport planes arrived on Friday afternoon in the devastated Kumamoto prefecture, carrying emergency supplies such as blankets, bottled water, and tents. Back in 2011, when Japan suffered one of the most disastrous earthquakes in Fukushima, Korea also sent emergency personnel along with relief supplies. Lee Min-young, Arirang News.
Across in Ecuador, another strong trembler struck off the coast of Ecuador at Thursday local time. Now, this is survivors of an earlier deadly quake that killed more than 580 people, clamored for food, water, and medicine in parts of the disaster zone. Kim Jung-soo with details.
The South American country of Ecuador was once again hit by a magnitude 6 earthquake. According to local reports, the latest quake resulted in no additional casualties, but with aftershocks lasting for days, survivors of last Saturday's deadly 7.8 magnitude earthquake are struggling to cope with the harsh aftermath of the disaster. They are mostly in need of the basics such as food, water, and medicines, not to mention other daily necessities.
I have no idea how long I will stay here or when I can restart my life. All our houses went down in the quake.
Amid ongoing rescue operations, damaged roads are making efforts to send supplies and aid more difficult. The damage caused by the earthquakes is estimated to be over $3 billion, and the death toll of 580, with at least 150 others still unaccounted for. Kim Jung-soo, Arirang News.
Well, back here in this country, a passenger train derailed earlier this Friday in the southern port city of Yeosu, killing 1 and injuring 8 others. While authorities investigate the exact cause of the accident, excessive speed has emerged as the most likely culprit. Ian Chin has the latest on the rail accident.
A passenger train from the Mugunghwa line heading to the southern city of Yeosu from Seoul derailed and partially flipped over at around 3:40 a.m. on Friday. The accident took place near Yulchon Station in Jeollanam-do province and resulted in the death of the head engineer, while 8 more people were injured and taken to a nearby hospital. But according to a local police officer, the number of casualties didn't escalate further thanks to the calm way passengers got themselves out of the derailed train without panicking and waited patiently until emergency personnel arrived at the scene. Local police are reporting that the cause of the derailment was the excessive speed of 127 kilometers per hour at which the train was running when shifting tracks. According to guidelines, the train should have been traveling at 50 kilometers per hour top. However, further investigation is underway due to some contradicting claims. The second engineer, who's currently at a hospital, is insisting that he was misinformed by the train controller who was on duty at the time of the accident regarding what station the train was supposed to shift tracks. The controller, however, denies this claim. The Korea Railroad Corporation has suspended all train operations between Suncheon Station and Yeosu Expo Station for the time being. The recovery work is expected to wrap up within few hours, and train schedules are expected to normalize by Saturday morning. Yinxin, Arirang News.
Now shifting our focus, during the Korean War, selfless and courageous young men and women from all over the world put their lives on the line to fight for freedom as strangers in a strange land. That was 65 years ago. And today, some of these war veterans have been invited back to Korea. Our Kim Ji-yeon got up close on a very special anniversary.
The Ministry of Patriots and Veteran Affairs invited 107 Korean War veterans and their families for a week-long stay to the country to commemorate the 65th anniversary of the Battle of Gapyeong and Imjingang River, some of the fiercest battles waged during the war.
59 British soldiers died while some 530 were captured by the enemy in the Battle of Imjingang River in April of 1951. They valiantly battled to impede communist forces from taking over the Korean peninsula. As the veterans pay their respects to their fallen comrades, they recount memories of what they witnessed of the war and how far the country has come since.
When I come here in 1950, when I did, there wasn't a building standing because they were all bombed and shelled and everything like that. It was devastation. Terrible, terrible, terrible. Now, it's gorgeous.
In the Battle of Gapyeong on April 23rd to 25th, 1951, South Korean and UN troops outnumbered 5-1 slowed the advancement of Chinese Communist forces into the southern part of the peninsula.
When we were coming in from Incheon, but I remember, and I'm going to show more when we go to Gapyeong. That's where I got wounded on the 24th and 25th of April, 1951. I was wounded twice in the hip and once in the right ankle.
Today, the survivors trace the footsteps of the fallen back to the country that they risked their lives to protect.
All I could say about this country to my family and friends is that I do really give the Korean people 10 out of 10 for what they've done. I do really, because it's a beautiful country now. It is a beautiful country. Yes, yes, definitely.
Kim Ji-yeon, Arirang News.
Well, Korea is one of the leading plastic surgery centers in the world, and the nation's plastic surgeons are using their skills beyond cosmetic surgery. They're providing free scar removal surgeries for North Korean defectors as part of efforts to heal both their physical and emotional wounds. Oh Jung-hee has this story.
Scars, hair loss, and cigarette burns. Many North Korean defectors who have escaped to South Korea wear such wounds on their bodies, reflecting their perilous past lives. The vivid scars add to the hardships of these defectors, most of whom have a difficult time blending into the South Korean society. Such is the case of this defector, identified only by her surname Kim.
When I first came to South Korea, I got a tattoo on my wrist to hide a blade scar. Now I'm worried about rolling up my sleeves because people here look down on tattoos.
To help ease their pain, one Seoul-based police chief launched the Appearance Improvement Project, an initiative that aims at removing physical scars for free.
I saw a number of North Korean defectors falling into depression because of their scars, as their appearance makes it harder for them to settle in the South. I wanted to lessen their emotional pain by curing their physical scars.
The project began in 2014 through an MOU between the Yongsan Police Station in central Seoul and the Korean Association of Plastic Surgeons. Since then, over 1,800 plastic surgery clinics across the country have pitched in to provide scar removal surgeries and restoration of damaged body parts completely free of charge. 22 defectors have completed their surgeries and some 40 people are on the waiting list.
If their wounds had been treated properly, they wouldn't have suffered as much. As South Korea has some of the world's best plastic surgery clinics and specialists, we hope to use our talent to help them adjust.
And Kim will hopefully be able to begin her life anew.
I'm really excited. I was always hiding my wrist, but after the surgery, I can be carefree.
This project will be ongoing for years to come. Any North Korean defector in South Korea is eligible to sign up for a life-changing procedure that can go some way to healing physical and emotional wounds. Oh Jung-hee, Arirang News.
Well, Korean songs, TV dramas, movies, webtoons, these have been making a splash on social media in recent years. Fans of a dozen nationalities got together in Seoul today to celebrate the growing popularity, and our Oh Soo-young was there.
A flash mob of several dozen Korea clickers springs up in central Seoul. Representing 12 nationalities, the participants are members of the Korean government's cultural contents Facebook page, which offers foreigners up-to-date information on Korea.
Our Korea Clickers Facebook page has topped 600,000 followers, so we're here to celebrate with 60 of our fans.
Many of these Korea clickers are avid fans of Korean cultural contents, ranging from music and gaming to dramas and animation.
I would say I really like dramas and also webtoons. I would say most of them I see through Facebook, but there are also some web pages like Korean Naver or Daum.
In the last 5 years, Korea has seen its cultural content exports grow at an average pace of 8% a year, hitting $5.7 billion in 2015.
Gaming accounts for around half of Korea's cultural exports, but recently, web-based dramas and cartoons have seen a significant rise in popularity across the world. This is on the back of global consumer preferences for short and catchy content optimized for social media platforms.
The Korea Creative Content Agency expects the country's exports to top $6 billion this year, up 11.6% from the year before. Experts say the upward trend will likely continue, due to the country's strong ICT infrastructure and unique market environment that sets it apart from more established markets around the world.
Korea has a wide variety of amateur authors and artists who enjoy both consuming and creating contents, so they quickly adapt to market trends and demands, producing a diverse and abundant array of stories.
But there's more room for improvement. The size of Korea's industry ranks 7th in the world and accounts for roughly 3% of the global content market. To develop its global market capacity, experts say linguistic and cultural barriers must be overcome, chiefly by involving locals in the making of the contents. Also, content makers need to make use of popular international platforms to reach a wider audience. Oh Soo-young, Arirang News.
The world of pop is in mourning again after the death of American music legend Prince. Fans remember the pop maestro overnight with purple tributes, dance parties, and tweets following his sudden death at 57. Kim Min-ji reports.
Prince, one of the most inventive and eccentric icons of pop, died early Thursday local time. The 57-year-old was found unresponsive in an elevator at his Minnesota estate and was later pronounced dead. It comes days after reports that he had been suffering from the flu, and an investigation has been launched to find the exact cause of his death. Making his debut in the late 70s, Prince released more than 30 albums and is famous for songs like Purple Rain and When Doves Cry. He sold more than 100 million records during his career and won 7 Grammy Awards. News of Prince's death shocked fans and sparked mass tributes and messages of condolences from around the world.
He wasn't like anyone else. He was like, James Brown wasn't like him, Michael Jackson wasn't. He was very unique in what he did. He brought something new that nobody ever thought about doing.
Prince, we lost a legend. He's one of those people that he's before his time. There'll never be another Prince.
Kim Min-ji, Arirang News.
April 22nd marks International Earth Day, and to coincide with the date, representatives from over 150 nations are gathering at the UN headquarters in New York to sign the landmark climate change agreement that was reached in Paris last year. Well, individual countries have vowed to do their part in tackling climate change, and Korea is no exception, having set a challenging target of reducing its greenhouse gas emissions by 37%. Our Kwon Jang-ho takes a look at what actions have been taken in today's news feature.
Last December, a landmark deal was reached among global leaders to try and tackle the ongoing global warming problem. The agreement aims to stop global temperatures from increasing over 2 degrees Celsius since pre-industrial times. In order to achieve this, individual countries were given the responsibility to set their own targets and goals, including Korea, which said it will reduce greenhouse emissions by 37% by the year 2030.
누구나 신재생 설비, 에너지 저장 장치, 전기차 등을 통해서 생산하고 저장한 전력을 자유롭게 팔 수 있도록 전력 프로슈머 시장을 개설할 것입니다.
One such prosumer project has already begun. The first energy prosumer village was launched in Suwon last month. The term prosumer is an amalgamation of the words producer and consumer, where a single individual produces and uses energy by themselves. These homes run on those solar panels you see there on the roof. Any electricity left over is either stored or sold to their neighbors at a cheaper price than the national grid. Prosumers are able to sell the electricity they produce at a higher price than they would receive from the national grid. And the consumers would be buying energy at a cheaper rate, especially for high energy users who pay higher costs due to Korea's progressive rate scheme.
It's great that I can save money and sell cheap power to my neighbors. I hope this leads to more people taking solar power in the future.
It helps a lot in the winter and summer, when we use a lot of electricity for heating and air conditioning, respectively. The progressive rate made it very expensive.
The government is planning to establish 3,000 prosumer households by the end of next year, and they are also looking to expand the scheme to schools and apartment buildings.
Currently, our energy supply is centralized in nuclear or coal power stations, and it's leading to big consequences in terms of climate change. So if more people were to become prosumers, it would signify a small starting point to help with that global problem.
To reach the emission targets, the government has been keen to stress that it cannot be achieved by policy and industry efforts alone. A government-backed public campaign launched in 2014 is challenging people to reduce daily greenhouse emissions by 1 ton a year. To put into perspective, using a reusable bag instead of a plastic one saves 2.5 kilos of emissions. Cycling to work instead of driving will save almost 500 kilos. By giving specific measurements, the government expects to better inform the public on how to implement eco-friendly measures in everyday life. The government is making efforts to reduce greenhouse emissions at a national level, but there's still a long way to go. While levels of CO2 emission per person since 1990 has decreased by about 7% on average for OECD countries, Korea's level have increased by over 110%.
I think the government needs to treat this issue as a crisis, like the IMF financial crisis, so it has to put together strong policies, convince industries to act, and instill in the public the need to change.
The first 3 months of 2016 have been the warmest on record in 136 years. Korea's target to reduce emissions by 37% is ambitious, but it may be needed to help in the global fight against climate change. Kwon Jang-ho, Arirang News.
Well, weekend is upon us, and Ji-hyun said earlier this week that pleasant weather conditions are in store for the next couple of days. So let's go right over to the Weather Center to check on that. Ji-hyun, so do we expect sunny and mild weekend?
Well, yes, sunny and mild, but it's also going to be quite dusty over the weekend.
Right. How dusty is it going to be? I think we've been hearing that it's going to be the worst dust conditions this year over the weekend.
That is right, Kanyang. And actually, the level of fine dust already started to go up since late afternoon today in the capital. And these dusty conditions will get even worse tomorrow, going up to very high levels across the nations. But the levels are subject to change from time to time, so be sure to keep an eye on the forecast. So despite comfortable temperatures and a good amount of sunshine, being outdoors is not suggested, especially tomorrow as we just saw. Wear a mask if you have to be outside and beware of the big gaps in temperatures as well as the single-digit morning lows are in the forecast for tomorrow. Here in Seoul, kicking off at 8 degrees Celsius and 9 for Daejeon, while Busan and Jeju will start out at 15 and 13 degrees Celsius. And as for the daily highs, Seoul will top out at 19 degrees Celsius, while Busan and Jeju will see a high of 20 and 18. Now, apart from the dust, May is right around the corner, and higher than normal temperatures are expected for next month, while June and July will have about similar temperatures to seasonal averages. That's Korea for you, and here's international weather for viewers around the world.
Well, why don't we remember what Mother Nature has given us on this Earth Day? That is our broadcast on this Friday night. I'm Moon Gun-young. Thank you as always for staying with us. Hope you have a great weekend, and we'll see you same time right back here on Monday on NewsCenter.